The bells of Toledo tolled against a leaden sky, their voices thick and hollow, echoing across the stone roofs of the old city like a death knell stretched over centuries. A slow rain fell, slicking the cobblestones and turning the narrow alleys into rivers of blackened water. Along those passages, half hidden in shadow, the citizens hurried to their homes, their heads bowed, their cloaks drawn tight as though to ward off an invisible presence. They did not speak. To be seen speaking, even in whispers, was to court suspicion. In the square before the tribunal, a great wooden door stood sealed by iron bands. Behind it, the holy office of the Inquisition ruled with its own brand of silence, a silence that swallowed every cry, every plea, every confession torn from the broken throats of its victims. No one saw inside those chambers. No one ever wished to. And yet within those walls, a man named Matteo de Vivar waited. Shackled by wrists and ankles, he knelt on a damp floor slick with straw and filth. He was not a poor man by birth. Once he had walked proudly through the same streets that now shunned his name. He had worn velvet sleeves, studied the law, and spoken in the ear of powerful men. His voice had been a thread in the tapestry of the court. But whispers, always whispers, had undone him. Whispers that he harbored books not sanctioned by the church. Whispers that his blood carried a shadowed stain of old lineage, neither wholly Christian nor wholly safe. Whispers had teeth sharper than knives. His cell smelled of rust and damp mortar. A single torch burned low in the corridor, casting a sickly glow through the bars, as if daylight had been forbidden here. He could hear the scratching of rats beneath the floorboards, the trickle of water seeping through stone. Time was measured not by sun or moon, but by the hollow rhythm of boots that passed beyond the door, sometimes pausing, sometimes lingering, as though listening for breath. Matteo's lips were cracked, his tongue swelled with thirst. He had been questioned twice already. Each time they had asked the same thing, names, names, names. Who had given him the books? Who had attended the gatherings? He had spoken none, not even when they stretched his limbs upon the rack until he felt the ligaments scream like torn ropes. Silence was his last inheritance, and he clung to it with a ferocity that terrified even himself. Yet silence could not defend him forever. He knew this. They would break him as they had broken others. He remembered the faces of men who had once walked proudly beside him, now gaunt, hollow-eyed specters dragged through the square, their tongues cut or their backs scored with whips, until bone shone beneath the skin. Some had been burned. Their ashes, scattered by the wind, had perhaps already settled upon his roof, upon his books, upon the cradle where his infant son once slept, before death carried the child away. A key grated in the lock. The heavy door opened, flooding the chamber with a draught of stale air. A figure stepped inside, Fray Hernando, the Dominican. His robes were white, but shadow clung to him as if the fabric had been dipped in smoke. His face was gaunt, the cheeks hollow, the eyes sunk deep in sockets that seemed too narrow to contain them. A crucifix hung from his neck, but the gleam of it was dulled by the torchlight, as though the metal itself recoiled from the work it bore witness to. "Matteo de Vivar," the friar intoned, his voice low, as if addressing both the prisoner and some invisible audience beyond. "The tribunal has decided. You will be examined again." The words crawled through Matteo's stomach like cold worms. He tried to rise, but the chains dragged him back to his knees. "I have nothing more to tell," Matteo whispered, though his throat was raw, every word rasping like sand across stone. Hernando leaned close, his breath smelling faintly of bitter herbs and incense. "It is not for you to decide when truth is spent. God demands the full measure. We are but his instruments." Behind him entered two guards, their faces hidden beneath iron visors. They unshackled Matteo from the wall but left his wrists bound, dragging him out into the corridor. The torchlight swung wildly as they moved, shadows chasing them like specters through the labyrinth of stone. Matteo stumbled on uneven steps, his bare feet striking against sharp edges, the iron biting into his wrists until blood welled beneath the skin. They brought him into a chamber he had not yet seen. It was vast, its ceiling arched like the nave of a cathedral, though black with soot. At the center stood an array of instruments. Wood, iron, rope, each contrived with a precision that spoke not of haste, but of centuries of refinement. Here was the rack he knew, there the strappado with its cruel pulley, and beside them, objects he could not name, shapes whose purpose whispered of horrors his mind recoiled from imagining. Candles guttered along the walls, their light thin and trembling. The floor was damp, and a smell hung in the air. Burned leather, old blood, sweat ground into the stone until it seemed the very walls bled with memory. A scribe sat at a table, quill poised, ink waiting to record every word, every cry, every admission forced from flesh and spirit. "Sit him there," Hernando commanded. The guards pressed Matteo onto a low wooden chair bolted to the floor. His arms were bound to the rests, his ankles to the legs. He could not move. He felt as though he had already been entombed. Fray Hernando circled him slowly, his footsteps measured, deliberate. "You believe yourself strong," he said, almost with pity. "But strength is not of the body. Strength lies in obedience to God's will, and His will is revealed through the tribunal." Matteo's head sank forward. His body trembled, though from fear or fever he could not tell. He thought of his wife, Isabel, her hair dark as the ravens that gathered on the cathedral spires, her hands soft upon his brow the last night he saw her. Had she been taken? Was she safe? He dared not ask. "Tonight," Hernando continued, "we employ the question in its most perfect form, an instrument of clarity, devised so that no falsehood can endure. Few survive it unchanged, fewer still, with souls unshattered. Yet salvation lies only through its gate." The friar raised his hand. At once the guards fetched something from the shadows. Matteo heard the scrape of iron, the groan of wood, the faint jangle of chains. They rolled it forward, a device unlike any he had yet seen. A narrow frame of timber curved and studded with small iron spikes, and at its center a wheel with leather straps. It resembled a cradle, yet no child would ever be laid in it. A murmur passed through the chamber, though none dared name it. Matteo's blood froze. He felt the air grow heavy, pressing against his chest, suffocating him with the weight of foreboding. The friar's lips curled in something like reverence. "The Virgin's embrace," he whispered. "The worst torment devised, yet the purest. Here the flesh speaks its final truth, and the soul is laid bare." Matteo's heart thundered, each beat, a hammer blow in his ears. He tried to speak, to deny, to pray. But no words came, only a dry gasp, a shudder that racked his frame. The guards moved closer, reaching for his bonds, and at that moment the candles flickered violently, as if some unseen wind had swept through the chamber. The shadows danced across the walls, twisting into grotesque shapes. For an instant, Matteo thought he saw faces screaming, mouths wide in endless agony, pressed against the stone as though trapped within it. He closed his eyes, but still he felt them, surrounding him, filling the darkness with their voiceless cries. When he opened them again, Fray Hernando was staring directly at him, his gaze burning with a fervor that was almost inhuman. "Confess," the friar said softly, almost tenderly, "or enter the embrace." The wheel creaked as the device was prepared. Mateo's breath came ragged, his vision dimming at the edges. He knew the moment had come. Silence or betrayal. One would kill. His body, the other, his soul. And as the guards seized him, lifting him from the chair, Mateo's mind fractured into a scream. The chamber seemed to tighten as the guards lifted Mateo from the chair. Iron scraped against stone, chains rattled like laughter in the gloom, and the wheel of the device turned with a groan that echoed through the vaulted ceiling. His feet barely brushed the ground before they were forced onto the spiked cradle. Cold iron bit through the thin cloth of his shirt, the points pressing just enough to whisper of the pain that awaited once weight pinned him fully against them. His lungs seized. He tried to push back, but the guards' hands were unyielding. They pressed him down slowly, as though prolonging the moment, savoring the inevitability of flesh-meeting iron. Each point touched him, first the shoulders, then the spine, then the tender curve of the lower back. Small bursts of pain blossomed, sharp as needles, but it was not yet torture. It was a promise. Fray Hernando's voice floated through the chamber, calm, measured, as if intoning scripture. This device is no invention of cruelty, Mateo Dei. Viva. It is the mirror of the soul, the embrace of purity. You may end this now. Speak the names, reveal the circle, and God will forgive. Mateo bit down hard on his tongue, tasting blood. His heart hammered, but his voice, when it came, was steady though cracked. There are no names. The friar sighed, a sound of weary resignation, as though pitying a child who would not learn his lesson. He gestured. The wheel was turned. The leather straps coiled around Mateo's chest and thighs, pulling him tighter against the cradle. The spikes dug deeper, pricking skin, drawing small beads of blood that seeped and trickled. A dozen little flames of pain, and yet he felt the terror of what would come if the straps tightened further. The scribe's quill scratched softly, recording each word, each refusal. The faint sound was unbearable in its indifference, as though the very act of suffering was already written into history, cold, unalterable. Mateo shut his eyes. He saw Isabel's face, framed by lamplight in their small library, the night he had read aloud from a forbidden text. She had laughed gently, not out of scorn, but of wonder, her voice low, trembling with fear at the risk they took. "These words," she had whispered, "they are dangerous only because they are true." He clung to that memory now, as the straps tightened again, the spikes pressed into his ribs, his arms, his legs. Pain blossomed like stars in a night sky, each point sharp, insistent. His breath came in ragged gasps. "Confess," Hernando murmured. "Confess, and this ends." Mateo's jaw ached from clenching. A cry threatened to break free, but he swallowed it, choking on the taste of iron from his bitten tongue. He thought of the others, the ones who had spoken. Their names had not saved them. Their confessions had not spared them the fire. Only betrayal remained, carved into memory like scars. The wheel turned again. Now the spikes pressed deep enough to puncture muscle. His body arched involuntarily, but the straps dragged him back, each movement forcing him against the iron teeth. His scream tore free at last, a raw, guttural sound that seemed to shake the chamber. The scribe did not flinch. He wrote. Sweat poured down Mateo's face, his vision blurring. His fingers clawed helplessly against the restraints. He felt warmth trickle down his sides where the spikes pierced deepest. The pain was constant, unrelenting, but worse was the knowledge that the wheel could still turn further, that more layers of flesh could be yielded to its merciless embrace. "Names," Hernando said almost kindly. "Give them, Mateo. End this torment. You are not the first to falter. God forgives weakness." The friar's hand rested lightly on the crucifix that hung at his breast. His eyes gleamed with fervor, as though he truly believed he held salvation within that chamber of torment. Mateo opened his mouth, But no words came, only a sob wrung from somewhere deep, a sound he had not made since childhood. For an instant, despair nearly consumed him, and with it the temptation to speak, any names, even false ones, to end this nightmare. But then he remembered another face. His father's, stern, proud, a man who had whispered to him as a boy that truth was the only inheritance worth keeping. "We live and die by it," his father had said. "Even if the world strips us of all else, truth remains ours." Mateo swallowed back the cry and forced himself to breathe, shallow though it was. "There are no names," he croaked. Hernando's expression hardened, the faint trace of pity vanishing. "Then you shall have the full embrace." The guards turned. The wheel again. Mateo's body convulsed as the spikes drove deeper, some striking bone. He felt them grind against his ribs, felt something tear inside with a searing heat that spread through his chest. His scream was hoarse, broken, yet endless. His vision filled with white, then red, then black. Somewhere beyond the haze of agony, he heard Hernando's voice. "This is mercy. Better the flesh be scourged than the soul be damned." But the words dissolved in a roar of pain. His thoughts scattered, his memories splintered. He could not tell if the screams he heard were his own or those of the shadows pressed into the walls. The wheel slowed. The friar raised a hand. "Enough for now." The guards held still. Mateo's body slumped against the spikes, trembling uncontrollably. Blood seeped from countless wounds, pooling beneath him. He was barely conscious, his breath shallow, ragged. Hernando leaned close, his voice a whisper at Mateo's ear. "Think upon this, Devised. Tomorrow we return. You will find truth easier to speak when the embrace is all you know." The straps were loosened. Mateo cried out as the spikes withdrew, every nerve screaming as the wounds tore wider. He collapsed, to the ground, barely able to move. The guards dragged him back to his cell, leaving a trail of blood across the stone. The door slammed shut. Darkness swallowed him whole. He lay there, gasping, unable to shift without agony. The damp straw beneath him stank of mold and filth. He tried to pray, but no words came. Only pain, endless and suffocating. Time lost all meaning. Hours, perhaps, passed, or only moments. In the blackness, he thought he heard voices, soft, whispering, too faint to grasp. They called his name, urged him to rise. Faces formed in the dark, pale, hollow-eyed, the same faces he had seen flickering in the candlelight. They surrounded him, countless, pressing close. One bent low, its mouth brushing his ear. The voice was not Hernando's. It was softer, feminine, familiar. "Mateo," it whispered, "you must endure. There is more yet to be revealed." His eyes flew open. The cell was empty, yet the whisper lingered, cold as breath against his skin. Mateo's heart pounded, not with hope, but with dread, for if that voice was Isabel's, then she was not safe. She was here, somewhere within these walls, and if she had been taken, they would bring her too, to the Virgin's embrace.